There's truth and there's untruth. But if you stick to the truth, even against the whole world, you're still not mad.
Hello, it's February 2024, and I'm going to be talking about something that I have discussed in videos in passing, as well as dedicated some videos more specific to this topic. And you can say it even ties in with, for example, my recent videos, where I go off on tangents talking about external influences outside of human influences. And there's been some kickback to that, where people are, making claims that I'm talking nonsense and everything else. And that's a reflection on them. But really what I want to focus on is how easy it is for anyone, whether, just trying to think of a descriptive, you're mainstream or you're alternative. Now, mainstream would be people who watch mainstream news, get their information from authoritative positions and individuals and so forth. An alternative would be those who go to alternative sources. Now, I've talked about, for example, how alternative sources can be and is compromised, and this applies to any topic. And also I've talked about how, I'm just going to segue for a moment, how people will make uninformed conclusions, and then we get into the whole conclusion of wrongful convictions as an example. So people who are on alternative side will look at, for example, something historic, question it, and then try to find information that would contradict the mainstream narrative. Whereas on the other side, people who follow mainstream don't question it, despite, for example, any contradicting evidence, or not even entertaining the possibility that there could be, as an example, another explanation. And each side points the finger at the other, saying, well, you're crazy. Now, I've talked about how labeling someone using some alleged mental health issue is a good way to discredit them, and how the liberal arts theoretical pseudoscience of psychology is really a weapon. And anyway, that's a whole different tangent, and I've done several videos talking about it extensively. But each side is pointing the finger, saying, hey. Now, I want to start off with the people who are on the alternative side. Say, for example, those who call themselves truthers, and I'll even put in, for example, freedom fighters in that whole group, because there is a lot of connection there. The problem is when someone's trying to seek out the truth, they're not accepting a mainstream narrative, and they're trying to dig for the truth, so they go down what is known these rabbit holes to get to the truth, which is, on its face, a very good approach. However, the problem that happens more times than not now, people are digging so deep that rather than go, for example, towards the truth, it's having the opposite effect. So if you look at it on a straight line, you have on one side the mainstream narrative, and then in the middle you have the truth, and then you have on the other side untruth. So people will go hit the truth, past the truth, because they're still digging, because they can never accept that, okay, this is it, I found it. And if they do, then they need to spend countless hours and so forth finding more and more examples to support whatever position that they want to support. And to segue for a moment, we see where we have a lot of people putting out content, regardless on what platform, who play into that. Whether they realize it or not, they're playing into that, feeding people that whatever. And I've talked about how on an extreme scale, for example, people want to be fed negativity and they thrive on that. So these people who put out this content repeatedly over and over, reiterating the same thing and finding new examples, again, the problem is eventually you're going to run out of examples, and then you start getting into the area that they've tried to avoid, and as a very loose descriptive, start making things up, and you start pulling away from the truth. And people who are trying to find the truth end up the same way. They get to the truth, it's like, yeah, and then they maybe can't even recognize what they found, and they continue digging, and then they start, for example, seeing whatever it is that they want to see on any topic everywhere, and it just goes out of hand. And that's a very bad problem, because it's having the adverse effect that they want. Now, on the other side, when you have people just simply, as a descriptive, blindly following mainstream narratives, they will tend to see everything through that lens. So even if some evidence presents itself, they can't recognize it, or they don't want to recognize it. And not wanting to recognize it could be anything from ego, or to it being or becoming part of their personal identity, to a belief system, or perhaps even a religion, and everything's all mixed up, and they can't let go of, for example, an official narrative. So we see that this issue occurs on both sides. And the big problem, really, and I've talked about this, and I've highlighted YouTuber Mindshock talking about logical fallacies and all this other stuff. That's really the underlying problem to both sides, or any sides. It could be multiple sides, I guess, where people fail to apply logic. And say, for example, someone might have a belief or conclusion on whatever topic it is, and they make assumptions. Now, whether those assumptions are warranted or not, that's not the point. The point is they're making assumptions, and then from there they go off on tangents, and then they start building a new narrative. And I've said even in recent videos how you might find other people that will say, hey, yeah, that I resonate, which applies to machines. Machines resonate, but I mean, that's a different topic in itself. But you know, they just feel good about it. It's like makes sense to them because of their limited life experiences and knowledge base and so forth. And then you have a whole new tangent created, and perhaps over time, 100,000 years maybe, we have a religion now that's come from that. And you can kind of see this with what's known today as New Age. And if you look back throughout history, anytime there was a new religion that formed, it was New Age, and over time it just becomes whatever it becomes. But going back to this topic, where people are blindly accepting something and going off on these tangents and completely missing the truth. And we even see this on the micro scale. So addressing what I just did generally would be the macro. Even on the micro scale, for example, where we have individuals making uninformed conclusions about someone, and where we see the real problem is when authoritative types of people are involved. You can have, say, for example, a busybody making an uninformed conclusion about someone or situation. They call someone else, say, police. They come and they're making, in their heads before they even arrive, they're making these uninformed conclusions and running all these scenarios in their heads. So by the time they arrive somewhere, it's already starting to set like concrete. And then the individual, say for example, that they're investigating or the situation is innocent, but everything just escalates beyond crazy. And then we see the same thing if something goes before the courts and we have biases. Everyone has a bias. They might not like something, or they might not like a movement or whatever. And that reflects on how cases are handled within the courts, not just by the judge, for example, but by prosecutors and lawyers, defense lawyers, whatever. And everything just gets all skewed up. And the big problem, again, is the underlying problem of relying on logical fallacies. Now, I've said many times, when you want to get to the truth, say on a topic, say you're looking at a specific topic, you want to use independent, related, unrelated, direct, indirect sources to get to the truth. So there might be a topic, I can't even think of one off the top of my head, that you want to verify, or an event you want to verify. You want to look at what was going on around that event or around that individual. What peripheral things that you can bring into your analysis. For example, what happened? What's going on? What's being said by someone who may not even be a witness, but something else. That was an example. A witness could be an individual to a whole civilization, an empire or something. What were they talking about? What was going on? And then you start getting to, okay, the key is once you get to that point where you start to eliminate things that may be or are in question, just eliminate it. Just, there's no point of discussing something to no end, because if you can't get to a conclusion, then it's pointless. Just eliminate it. And you eliminate all these things until you get to, as a descriptive, the pieces you're left with. Put those together, and chances are, more times than not, that's the truth, or very, very close to it. And once you get to that point, then what you need to do is step back and say, okay, I got it. Now, when new information is presented, it's factual, it's been vetted, then you apply that to this jigsaw puzzle and see how it fits. But the key is, once you get to that point, you don't have to keep going down the rabbit hole, because people talk about going down rabbit holes, but they don't realize that rabbit holes, like rabbits, or even, for example, ant colonies, they have little holes in the ground. They have, and there's other animals actually that have fake little passages, and that's the whole point, is they create these dead ends. Or, you can continue on for a long time and eventually hit a dead end. So when you're talking about going down these rabbit holes, remember that for one reason or another, there's these tangents down the rabbit hole, and if you end up going down one of these tangents, eventually it lead to a dead end. And for example, a lot of animals who build underground create these things to, for example, redirect water and to divert predators. If they ever get inside, the predator has several options. Hopefully they choose the right one. Some animals that go underground actually build barricades, an artificial wall, when they're inside, or move a rock or something so they can be safe and be in peace. The predator comes down, goes off on tangents, and think, oh, this is empty here. Even though they might smell, there's nothing here. And that's something when people talk about going down these rabbit holes, they never consider, is these traps or these dead ends. So I just wanted to give you some things to think about, whether it be on the world stage or in your own personal life. Be very careful. Be sure to vet the information. You have to set aside your emotions. And I've said, Most people in the world today lack critical thinking skills, an extensive knowledge base, and cannot separate emotions when making conclusions. And that's another issue here, especially in today's world. Most people are emotion-based. Set your emotions aside. You may not like where the truth takes you, but it takes a strong character to accept that. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share.
Listen to this and write it down if you can't remember it. You're never going to outgrow warfare. You simply must learn to fight. I hear people saying to me, oh, when is it going to get easier? When you die.